The Memphis Grizzlies, in my opinion at least, happen to be the team that is getting the most disrespect heading into the NBA season. For one reason or another, people are allowing the opinion that has been formed of Ja Morant to influence their entire perspective of what this team can be. Not because of Ja Morant's talent or capabilities, but because of his off the court stuff that happened in years prior. That is quite the foolish way of thinking and identifying a talent level of an NBA team. Sure, there might be holes in this team, and no, I'm not going to say that they're the favorite to win the championship. But by no means can you say this team is not a contender or even at least a team that's going to make a run or potential run in the Western Conference. This Memphis Grizzlies team is A-OK, and yet people are treating them as if they are irrelevant in the large scheme of things. And what I want to address here is, well, folks, the biggest issue for this Memphis Grizzlies team is injuries. If there's going to continue to be injuries on this team, then yes, there will be a problem. And yes, we're not off to a great start. Having Vince Williams already get hurt, having G.G. Jackson be hurt, injury scared Jaren Jackson Jr. having a little bit of an injury, should be back pretty soon though. Ja Morant having the ankle worrisome injury right there, that obviously is A-OK, but certainly was a scare there, and so on and so forth. Yes, that is a concern. If this team's not healthy, just like any team, of course they're not going to be anything. But I'm not going to look at this team from a perspective if they're all going to be hurt. I'm going to look at them as if, let's say this team is healthy on paper that I'm looking at right now, and there's no reason this team can't be a good team this year. So let's break it down. At the helm of everything is Ja Morant. Ja Morant, for those that don't recall or are being blinded by what his off-the-court stuff happened a couple of years ago, might forget. Ja Morant was one of the biggest names in all of the NBA. He was one of the biggest attractions in the entire National Basketball Association. He was a guy that you could easily consider a top 10 player in the NBA, and there's no reason to think he can't do that. Do we not recall the short little preview we got of last season when he got back from a suspension before he got hurt again? He came off of not playing for a significant amount of time and dominated games right out the gate, and then obviously got hurt again. There's no reason to believe that same exact Ja Morant will not be playing on the NBA basketball court when this season commences. Ja Morant is going to be one of the premier players in the entire NBA, and if you're going to allow yourself to just view him based upon his past and what he did off the court, then that's foolish on your part. You can agree or disagree with what he wanted to do off the court. That's your problem to address. I'm looking at what I'm going to see on the basketball court. And what I will see on the basketball court is a guy that's going to be one of the best point guards in the NBA and might even be the best point guard in the NBA. So don't disrespect Ja Morant. And then around Ja Morant, you have a very solid roster that's been put together. His backcourt mate is going to be one of the premier defensive guards in all the NBA, and Marcus Smart. You then have Desmond Bane, a guy that can average you 20 points a game, one of the great floor spacers that he can shoot the ball, plays at a high level, a very underrated player. Is going to likely be at the small forward. A little undersized, yes, but he's going to likely be your starting forward now. And then you have a power forward, Jaren Jackson Jr., one of the premier defensive players in all of the NBA, a guy that is capable of being a legitimate all-star in this league, and is a guy that is easily capable of being the number 2 option on a championship team. At center, this is where maybe things are a little bit questionable, a little bit concerning, not quite familiar exactly what could happen here, and that's with Zach Edey. The preseason so far does look good, but it's a rookie. Preseason, you don't have extensive information or data to know exactly how it's going to pan out. So there are certainly question marks there. I think he actually could fit in well. I was the highest on him overall, but I addressed this draft class many times. This draft class was not a stacked draft class. This was a draft class where you could take gambles. You could take something that just fits a role. And there's a lot of similarities to what Steven Adams brought to Memphis Grizzlies a couple years ago that I see that Zach Edey could bring, just being, 4 or 5 inches taller than him. So I actually do think that Zach Edey could fit with this team. Now, time will tell how it's going to work in the playoffs when more game plans set in place, but that's something that he'll be starting center for the beginning of the season, and it could fit out pretty well there. Let's look at the bench. This is where there's a lot of pros, but there's some cons here as well. I will start with one of the biggest concerns for this team. That's at backup point guard. And it was set. Derrick Rose was going to be the backup point guard. A lot of people were excited to see that happen. Obviously, he decided to go retire. And so I look at this team right now, and the only guy that I would trust running point guard right now would be Marcus Smart, who's going to be starting alongside Ja Morant. They don't have a backup point guard on the roster. You could consider the two-way spot, Scottie Pippen Jr., maybe, but you don't want him playing a lot of minutes this year. So that's going to be a massive hole that needs to be addressed quickly, especially considering the fact that, okay, Ja can't play every game this season likely, and even if he does, what if a fluke injury happens or something occurs, we misses a week or two? I hope he doesn't, but just hypothetically, you could obviously shift Smart up and Bane up and move Vince Williams and GG Jackson to small forward, but I want to have a backup or 2 point guards. And the good news, there's 2 spots open currently for the Memphis Grizzlies after D Rose retirement. And they need that backup point guard quickly. Great news. Markelle Fultz, Dennis Smith Jr., both are NBA free agents as I speak. They should be signed to this deal. I don't see a better spot for them. Markelle Fultz or Dennis Smith Jr. getting them added up on into this team would be an absolutely perfect fit for the Memphis Grizzlies. Both of them would be exceptional backup point guards, could fit this team, and I think it would be great. Sign one of those 2 guys. I don't know why it hasn't been done already. Sure, you can go try trading for one as well, but why not just go add in one of those 2 guys currently listed in free agency for your team? I want to see that for the Memphis Grizzlies. Outside of that, the backups are pretty solid. Luke Kennard, love that guy. Love that he's brought back with the team. John Konchar and Jalen Wells, all solid guys right there. They're going to be running in the backup guard spot and small forward spot. Here's one that I'm very, very enticed in, though. The Vince Williams, GG Jackson group. You see, last year was a year that typically you could say, toss it on the drain, forget about it. The fans don't want to see it. Not a pleasant year at all for Memphis Grizzlies. But I'm someone that likes to be optimistic. I like to look at the good things here. And when I look at what happened last year, no, it was not successful. No, it was not pretty. But we saw something in these 2 guys right here. These 2 guys got a lot more minutes than they ever would have. It had injuries not occurred. And I saw something in them. Vince Williams and GG Jackson were both guys that I love watching. I think both these guys could actually be starting players. Now, the lineup is pretty much set here. And they're both hurt anyways right now, so it doesn't really matter to this extent. But Vince Williams and GG Jackson, you could slide both those guys into possibly being a starter for this team. And if not, high-level backup guys for now, but I think future starters on this team. And so you're going to have those kind of being your backup small forward, power forward guys when they get healthy again. And I'm excited because that was just year 1 for them last year. Seeing them take another year jump and see what they were able to develop in, very intrigued with that. Those 2 guys have massive potential where if they're off your bench, that could be huge for you. Also, if they could possibly be spot starters for them, whatever the case may be, 2 guys I really want to keep an eye on right there. Love those 2 guys off the bench. Then you have Brandon Clark. Got back on the back end of last season after tearing his Achilles. Looked decent the time we saw him play. Excited to have him back in the rotation and playing for the Memphis Grizzlies there. You then have 2 other guys I wanted to address. Jake LaRavia. Saw some decent minutes there. I don't think he's going to be a heavy factor here. Looking at 9th, 10th, 11th man possibly. But then you also have Santi Aldama. He also had a lot of flashes as well. So I'm not against any of this. Obviously, I'd say this. The downside for this team, the biggest thing to look at, injuries obviously got to be healthy. And you need a backup point guard ASAP. And then there's question marks overall. I'm not set on center. Like I said, he's a rookie, Zach Edey. And obviously Santi Aldama, Brandon Clark, whoever you want to run at the other center spot, you can count on them, nothing against that. But it's just stuff that I wouldn't go say, I don't really want them to go address it. They don't need to address it in free agency or trade right now. It's just let me see what happens. And by trade deadline, if they don't work out, make a move then. But overall, not against what's going on in Memphis at all right now. Like what they've got over on the roster right now. But like I said, 2 roster spots open. That's going to, at least 1 spot will have to be addressed before the start of the season. So that's something to look at. Would be shocked if it's not Dennis Smith Jr., Markelle Fultz, because they need a backup point guard. Your 2-way spots, Cam Spencer, Jay Huff, Scottie Pippen Jr., solid guys. Cam Spencer's the guy I really look at. I think he could be a guy that gets a standard contract eventually. Jay Huff, a solid 2-way guy. Pippen as well. You've seen flashes of him. Not too bad there at the 2-way spot either. So the Memphis Grizzlies are a team that I do look at this season and say, you know what? They're not my number 1 team heading into the season, no. But by no means am I looking at this team and I'm going to be disrespectful. I'm not going to look at it because of some off-the-court bias stuff or whatever people want to address or however they hate the Memphis Grizzlies, whatever their situation might be. I'm looking at this team and I say, you know what? There's no reason they're not competitive in the West this year. The West is razor thin in terms of how close those top teams are. And Memphis is firmly in that position right there. So when you look at the Western Conference, sure, they maybe are going to be the 6th seed. Maybe, I don't know. But the 6th seed this year could typically be a top 3 seed in most years. You've got so much talent in the Western Conference this year in the NBA that the games between number 1 to 3 and 3 to 6 and so on and so forth are going to be so thin that it's not something to be really worried about. So this Memphis team is a legitimate threat. As long as they get to the playoffs, which I think they will get to, they're going to be a threat. They're going to be a factor in the Western Conference playoffs. The Memphis Grizzlies are just A-okay. Love what they have built right there in Memphis.